very interesting if you live there and then you notice how Israel placed those boundaries. Many times in the same street, skipping where there is a densely populated Arab area, and then just leaving that outside the city limit, and then including other areas that are sparsely populated. And it goes on, it zigzags, through, especially I'm talking about the northern side, between Jerusalem and Ramallah. So I feel it has been very arbitrary for political consideration, and it needs to be retraced in a final solution.
Well, does this mean there could be some rough consensus here that a smaller than the late June 1967 boundary might in effect create a Quds as opposed to Jerusalem?
No. I'll buy that.
The problem is going to be the LC.
No.
Yes, with that proviso. The problem will be the LC.
Exactly. That's where the confrontation is. Everything else is politically soluble. When you deal with the old city, you are dealing with very deep historical and emotional issues. And I will repeat again, as I lose another few people from it, I really don't care. It's got to be on the record. Jewish experience is that when we didn't control the mosque in Hebron, we walked up 7 stairs and were spat on, or beat up if we walked up the 8th. Jewish experience is that in 1929, when we tried to put a couple of chairs down on Yom Kippur for people who couldn't stand in that alley, which was in front of the Western Wall, there were murderous riots. Within the consciousness of Jews, this is a fact. Just as I agree with Rashid, it is a fact that Jerusalem is much holier to Muslim consciousness than many Jews would like to say it is, because we would like to create the other person's narrative to make ourselves comfortable. We must listen to each other. And I'm begging you, listen to a Jew who says to you, the Jewish people does not trust anyone else with ultimate control of the old city.
When you look at Jerusalem, there are clearly 3 entities. There is the West Jerusalem, and there is the East Jerusalem, there is the walled city of Jerusalem, the old city. And I believe, I cannot speak for the Palestinian Authority, but I believe that if Jews, if Israel would accept the principle that West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, leaving now the old city on its own, that West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem will be shared as capitals with 2 states, I think they can begin to really address the important question of the old city of Jerusalem. I would like to affirm any sensitivities, any feelings of distrust which the Jewish community might have in Israel. But you see, at the same time, we feel that the old city of that Israeli occupation of the old city of Jerusalem, the walled city, has also not been fair. Historically speaking, the Jewish quarter is very, very small. Now look at it today. This creeping annexation, so we also cannot trust, Israeli sovereignty over the old city. But I believe that if we solve the political question on the shared sovereignty of the city of Jerusalem, I think we have to address all these sensitivities, and I'll be the first to really affirm the importance, of trying to really find a solution that would maintain the integrity of every community in the old city of Jerusalem.
A number of members of the audience raised the issue of Hebron. If there can be dual sovereignty there, why cannot be dual sovereignty in Jerusalem? I think probably that's a misunderstanding that Israel has not pronounced. To the best of my knowledge, that part of Hebron is under Jewish sovereignty. Israeli sovereignty is under the protection of the IDF. So it's not, at least at this point in time, a question of claim to sovereignty. But looking ahead, does anything in the Hebron Agreement provide any precedents for negotiations on the future status of Jerusalem? Yes.
Only one little comment. If it is feasible for Israel to divide Hebron, even though we consider this as an interim agreement, but if it is feasible to divide Hebron, why not then looking at Jerusalem as also dividing the city? I mean, it's just a question. But I'd like to
We keep shifting. Dividing the city, absolutely. I think the city should be divided. Keep saying that. Keep saying that shared sovereignty over East and West simply will not work. We seem to be reaching a consensus that once Jewish and Arab sovereignties are declared, that there will be a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem. The question, however, whether the Hebron, you say Hebron arrangement makes any sense here, there is a growing sentiment in Israel, as you know, that the 400 plus settlers in Hebron should eventually be evacuated. The notion that this arrangement is going to hold if a Palestinian state is indeed created, as it inevitably will be, and the political life goes forward, the notion that this arrangement is going to hold forever simply is not likely. It's not likely. And I don't think that Israel is about to want to create more little bastions like this inside angry and hostile territory. The solution in Jerusalem is partition and the working out of the complications of how do we all live together without trying to push each other out of the holy walled city, and under what auspices is it to be done. And it seems to me that that's really the only thing on which we're vehemently disagreeing in this panel.
I'm sure we can talk some other. Keep trying here. Dr. Pipes, some question of history from a 1950 resident of Jerusalem. While it's true that Amman neglected Jerusalem, that was not the Palestinian attitude, and it is the Palestinians who are now the actors on the peace process. There were several banks in Jerusalem. There was an office which issued IDs and passports, and one could get loans in Jerusalem without going to Amman. But going a little further back in history, I don't want to get too far back, but if Jerusalem was such a nothing town for Muslims, why didn't the Umayyad Caliph build the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Damascus, in his capital?
Well, that's simple. Damascus had its cathedral mosque, the former church of Damascus, which became the great mosque of Damascus. So there's no need for another mosque. And Jerusalem did have the sacred association of the fire and two religions. On the other points about Amman, I have to acknowledge that I read these points and didn't experience them. I will look further into them.
Hadrati, two questions. Please comment on the role of Hamas or Islamic Jihad from a specifically Christian Palestinian point of view, and how does the Judaization of East Jerusalem affect the mood of Palestinians to continue in the peace process, and what has been the role, what is the role of the Christian community of East Jerusalem to counter this Judaization process?
I think within the Palestinian community, Hamas has been considered an extreme form of Islam, and certainly not representing the mainstream of Islam. And so, but I believe that also that the rise of Hamas reflected the great frustration in the conflict, that the conflict was not really moving to a just solution. And whenever that happens, you always are bound to have extremist groups, that try to really address the issue in their own way. And unfortunately, this is the nature of extremism. So I believe, though, in spite of what I have said, that if a just solution is found, that we will have many extremists who will begin to really return to more of the middle stream, and I think that will happen. Although I would imagine on both the Jewish as well as the Islamic side, you will always have a core group of fundamentalists who will not accept reason because of their own ideology. But I think on the whole, many of the extremists hopefully will find themselves accepting a just solution. Now, with that, how active has the Christian community been regarding the Judaization of East Jerusalem? We are active to an extent. We are not in position of any power. The power that we have is our moral power, is the power of justice. So we, I believe, have been active in raising a voice. It might be a voice crying in the wilderness, but it's a voice, the voice of truth, trying to really address the whole issue and say, this is wrong, or this is right. This, in many ways, I think has been the main work of the Christian community. We write, we talk to groups, we try to appeal whenever we can, but I don't think we are able or have been able really to do more than that.
Related question. What have been the positions, solutions advocated by American Christian organizations in the peace process in Jerusalem?
Well, not that I'm an expert on this question, but there have been a range of suggestions. At one end of the spectrum, you have some evangelicals who take a more Likud than the Likud position. Elsewhere on the spectrum, people who I think have actually, in many cases, had experience in Palestine, and as a result of that experience, have come to feel that the Palestinians have been done an injustice and have supported justice for the Palestinians. I think that there hasn't been as active a discussion among some elements of the Christian community as they might have been on how the United States can be helpful. Obviously, a solution will have to emerge from the parties themselves. But that's not to say that and to ignore the 800-pound gorilla, which is the United States as a superpower, is obviously foolish. Even if the parties do resolve things on given that fact, I think that even more should be done to try and open up these kinds of questions, especially ones related to Jerusalem, and to see how people in this country can be helped.
Well, directly from that, a question, if the solution, as one speaker said, lies in Washington, what should be the optimum role for American policymakers?
Shall I take that? American policymakers seem to have moved on the Hebron negotiations that additional document of understanding which Dennis Ross drafted on the next couple of stages, and the letters that went to both Arafat and to Netanyahu, is essentially for the first time an avowed and formal stepping out of the role of enabler into the role of leader, of suggesting policy and in fact being part of enacting. Obviously the United States has decided in this administration that it wants this problem, if not settled, at least it wants the diplomacy of it to work. The question then is, what determines American policy? Where does it come from? Well, American policy comes from the usual complications of foreign interests as understood by various parts of the American people, pressures, pressure groups, not least of them, of course, the Jewish lobby, and a very deep American sense of what is just and what is fair, the notion of let's at least try to do the right thing. But I think America is now into this as it has not ever been before. And with an activist Secretary of State, even more activist than Mr. Clinton, than Mr. Christopher, after she gets over sorting out her own private emotions, I have no doubt that American policy is going to push. At which point, the question is who's going to push the pushers. And I would not doubt that the most recent flurry about American policy is related to the fact that more ideas, more pressure, more people are coming into the mix. So that should America be more involved? It is. It may be turn. The question now is, can I be very mean? The question now is, who's going to have private lunch with whom? In which hotel?
Should America be more involved? Daniel?
I'd like to make 2 points. One would be somewhat to disagree with Rabbi Hertzberg. I believe that the U.S. government did not make a decision to get more involved, as he correctly points out. It is now more involved. Rather, was brought in. American policy used to be, until about 1991, to make declarations of policy, statements of goals on a whole range of issues. Our policy for the last 6 or so years has been not to be quite mum on these matters. And the change that we all discern in the last couple of months is not so much due to a more forceful, an idea of a more forceful American presence in talks, but rather the need that was expressed by the parties and specifically by the Israelis. The Palestinians have long been eager for a more enhanced U.S. presence in the talks, and now under Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Israelis are eager for that as well. The striking element here is not a decision to make in Washington, but a decision to make in Jerusalem. The second point would be that, contrary to some expressions, sentiments expressed earlier, I do think that it's best to leave Jerusalem to the end, and for the following reason: that were the other It is more likely to be solved when it is the only obstacle between a peace than it is to be solved today when it is in the context of so many other things. So given that this is an emotional issue, a religious issue, a sentimental issue, rather than one of security interest in the usual mundane sense, it does make sense to leave it at the end. Where if it were to be the last outstanding issue, it is more likely to compromise on than it would be today.
Any other comments on the American role?
Yes. I mean, we would like, obviously, to see that American policy is based on international law, based on morality, rather than on pressure groups. And that's, I think, what makes the whole thing so tragic. I mean, that's why many of us Palestinians distrust American policymakers, because we believe that it is very much dependent on the power of the lobby, the Jewish lobby here, and on the way some of these politicians perceive American interest. But we would like to insist that if America wants to play a neutral and effective role, it would have to be based on international law, international resolutions, and on the morality of the situation for the sake of the two peoples.
Well, it may be, I could be permitted to comment, it may be tragic that policy is governed by special interests, but I think if you look at the American political system, it's traditional. And I'm reminded of a conversation I once had in Damascus when I was given a very stern lecture about the powerfulness of the Jewish lobby and how that was distorting America's whole approach to the area. I talked about lobbying in America, and I said, do you really think the Jewish lobby is the most popular, the most powerful group in the United States? He said, beyond question. And I said, no, you're wrong. For once you're wrong. It's the NRA. All right. If the United States, question, if the United States is not to be accepted, may not be accepted as a negotiator, if the United Nations cannot play that role, is there any other power that could, any other state that could? And I have a question specifically about Norway, or the work that it did on the Oslo Accords. I have a question about the role that Iran might play in the future. And I have a question about the role of the Pope. So, any comments about other roles, please?
All right. Iran is a very useful thing to mention, because I've been sitting here and wondering why we are talking about everything, all of the issues in the Middle East, and nuclear proliferation has not yet reared its ugly head. As a matter of fact, I think all of the issues about which we have been getting reasonably intense in a well-bred way, among old friends, Rashid and I in particular go back a very, very long time. We've been getting reasonably intense out of what? How large is the whole of the old city? 200 acres or something something like that. When the real problem in the world, in the Middle East, is nuclear proliferation. I gave a speech in Israel about 5 or 6 years ago at Van Leer Institute, and made a point of giving it